Hello everyone, thanks for coming back to the channel. This is going to be the video where I'm going to discuss some of the things I missed in my Sailfly review. This little guy right here. If you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to go watch that before you watch this. So you might want to leave this video and go watch the review video. I'll put a card up top to where you might find that. But the first thing we need to get to is the 2S flight. I didn't show a 2S flight in my review video, and that was just something that I kind of omitted because I had more fun on 3S. So several comments came in that they weren't comfortable with 3S, and 2S is very fine. As you see in this video, you might be able to watch these side by side with two phones or a tablet and a computer or what have you, and you can get a feel for any sort of perceived speed differences. And something to keep in mind, several other comments came in about the speed at which this seemed faster than, say, bigger quads with bigger motors. And I don't think that's quite the case, but the field of view on the camera is really, really wide, and that gives you an extra sense of speed. I think that field of view also, for me, enhances my enjoyment because it feels more like pod racing. You might remember years ago, Charpoo and a few other guys, I think it was Charpoo, but there was a big video that came out before FPV really became so mainstream, where people were racing in the woods, and they kind of felt as though it was a lot like pod racing. And that was one of the things that got me into wanting to investigate FPV, because at that time I think I was only flying line of sight with more, $50 toy-based quadcopters out in the street out in front of the house. But as far as the flight performance, something else that I was asked about was comparing the gnarly FPV Primo as well as the Tomoquad's Carrera, and I would say it's very difficult for me to make an actual comparison because the Carrera and the Primo are builds, so you've got to have the components. And the components are going to be very, very similar, if not exactly the same. And I will get to exactly the same when we get back to the desk. So you can use different combinations of motors if you choose to. But I would say these 1102 motors, they perform really well and they're very efficient. With the 1.5mm prop shaft, you're going to find they're going to be much more robust, especially in the prop shaft area, than their 1mm counterparts. But the main difference is the Primo has two different versions, and Tomoquads might. I haven't looked at his site as of tonight. He might have two different versions as well, but I think the Carrera was really a Mobula 7 transfer rather than having other options. So the Primo has an advantage there in that you can take a trash can and also put it in the Primo, where I don't think you can do that without hacking up the Carrera canopy, which is pretty nice. And I got a blue one, so I have an especial affinity for the blue that is the Carrera canopy. So you can fly bigger motors on the Primo. You can use a standard 9x9 mounting pattern on the Primo if you buy the 11.0X version. Keep in mind that if you buy the Happy Model motors, that you need to mount those on the Primo 8.0X version because of the mounting pattern on those motors. But it has options for you in the Primo line, whereas the Carrera is more of a straight transfer. I think they're very comparable when you have the same components on them. But the Carrera comes in at slightly a little bit more weight, and that could be a good or bad thing. It depends upon what you're looking for in your flight time. Of course, when we add weight, that generally reduces our flight time. It's going to reduce it a little bit, but not a lot, because it is about 3 3/4 grams, I believe. The Carrera also does not have the ability to adjust the camera angle, which the Primo does. The Sailfly does not have the ability to adjust camera angle. The arms are thicker on the Carrera, so that might prove to be some sort of durability, although I haven't had durability issue with the carbon in any of these in my flights. I think the durability is going to be mainly with the motors, because that's going to be what's going to take most of our impacts. I don't think the cameras or even the canopies are going to come all that much to play unless landing upside down or centering a pole that would fit between the arms. I do think it's mainly going to be the motors, because they are quite exposed in all those configurations. But if you're looking to stay lower and faster, I think you probably want to go with more weight. Otherwise, it's going to feel like it's going to want to continue to come up. Of course, with stick skills, you can overcome just about anything. I think 3S, for me, when we did the Mobula HD, 3S did not feel like an advantage, and it burned through the pack so much faster that I didn't feel there was any point of doing 3S on a 40mm prop. On this much larger prop, I do feel that there's an advantage, but that's me as a pilot. Everybody has specifics that they're looking for in their flight characteristics, or how they want to fly, or how they want it to feel when they fly. So that's something that I can't determine for you. It's something you kind of have to know about yourself. I do feel there's more low end, more quick response with the 3S, and I like that, but that has a lot to do with how I fly. So before we get into the questions, I want to talk about one particular thing and the reason why people if you're buying or building a Carrera or a Primo or anything else in the market, you may want to buy a Sailfly because of the price. You cannot buy the different components that are inside the Sailfly for less than you can just buy the whole dang thing. So let's look at this real quick. Excuse me while I look away. So if you put the flight controller and motors together, and these are just prices I found on the internet. The flight controller is 38 bucks, rounded to the nearest dollar. The motors, $10.50 each for those, $42. That's 80 bucks already. And for $85, you can buy the Sailfly. And I've got a coupon code down below where you can get 10% off. I'll see if I can't find any other sort of special coupons from any sort of vendors, and I'll put them down below as well. So we can get it below $85 versus those two components cost us 80 bucks. That's kind of hard to beat. You got the main guts. You can choose your own camera. But then let's go a little bit further, because that's not all you get for your 85 bucks. You get a camera that retails for about $23. You get a battery that sells supposedly for $9. I think that's going to be closer to 11 or 12. You get props, $3 or $4. You get a frame that's around $10. So all those other things are essentially free if you just buy the Sailfly, fly to gain that sort of experience, and then transfer it over to whatever you want to transfer it to. So to me, it seems like a buy-buy situation. If you want a Carrera or you want a Primo or you want something else, you should buy a Sailfly so you can move all that stuff to what you want. It's ridiculous, but I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. And I do think the 1102 motors are the way to go. The 1102 motors from Happy Model are very, very efficient. I think they're going to yield the longest flight time. I think they're probably going to have not the best flight performance, because different motors are going to come out and people are going to watch this later, but at this moment the flight performance is very, very good on those motors. If you get other 1102 motors, they're probably going to be 1.5 grams or 2 grams heavier than those motors, so then you've added possibly 8 or more grams to the machine, and that's going to change things pretty dramatic, because we're talking about 40 grams or less. Adding 8 grams to that's completely different. That changes how the micro flies. So if I had to give you my sales pitch, I think you need to buy a Sailfly if you're at all interested in any of these micros. Just any of them, or anything that might come out. Maybe you want to order one. Justin Middleton writes, "You do not seem overly enamored by the performance of this class. It is meant to be streets ahead performance-wise than any other, according to Mansoor Kebab." I think I was trying too hard to be informative and trying to be focused on producing a video that gave you the information that you needed. These things are up on pre-order, so you maybe have that itch and you're trying to make a decision right now so you can get in on that first batch possibly, and I wanted to try to give you that information. Do I like them? Yeah, I like all of these. They're very, very fun. Give the Primo some screen time. So they're all good fun. They're just a little bit different. And the differences are tiny, and some people may feel it, some people may not. I don't have a toothpick to try. Here's a Carrera, if I didn't put that on screen already, and I like the blue, and it has that extreme camera angle that I mentioned. But I do like it. It's hard for me to pick right at the moment if it's my favorite class. It might just be that it's new, and that new enjoyment that you get from it. So I think I would want to give myself more time of flying this class as well as other classes before I kind of give a class my seal of approval for my personal favorite. Frank Brajas and KnuckleheadRC, they kind of wrote the same sort of question about the reliability of the flight controller. I know that there's been a lot of discussion on specifically Facebook. It could be happening in other social media or websites as well. This is really kind of tough because so I've got 8 machines that have Happy Model flight controllers in them. Version 2s for the most part, I think. I only have 1 or 2 maybe of the version of the F3s. And then I have 5 of the Beta FPV models for 2S, the single board, not the dual stack. And in both cases, I had troubles with 1 board. So that's my sample. That's what I know to be certain. As far as other people's experiences, I'm not disagreeing with you. Your experience is always valid to you. I just can't verify it, and therefore I can't sit here and record a video and say that there is a problem based upon someone else's experiences or not. How I look at it is, for me, there's not a problem. I've caught 1 that went dead, and that one went dead on the bench after I replaced the pigtail. So it's very likely I got the board too hot. And that's one of the things we need to look at when we're saying something is a bad component, is how many are in the wild, how are they being treated, and how many are failing. So if you have one of the most popular products in the Mobula 7, and therefore possibly the flight controller going into other things like the Carrera, like the Primo, are we making other changes? Are we taking that soldering iron that's too hot and leaving it on there too long in order to get our camera connected, or to change out the pigtail to a XT30? For a time we were hearing, don't put an XT30 on because it'll burn out your 5-volt regulator. I think most of mine have the XT30 on them. I've just been running them that way. So when it comes to trusting that information, if it's your information, you should definitely trust it. But I can't record this video and say that that's certain or not. My experience is that they've both worked well, and I will continue to use them because they do work well for me. The key to this is how we're using it. Are we pulling a bunch of amps? What motors? What props? How many amps are pulled? Because it's only rated up to 5 amps. 6 peak, and I think it says 5 or 6 seconds. So if you're hitting 6 very regularly and definitely very long, I don't think you can expect it to live. I think you should expect it to die if you're pulling a bunch of amps. That's just the specifications of the board. If we go against that, we should expect it to die. Additionally, I have to bring up 2 other factors when it comes to social media data, and these are kind of story times. You might remember when the LaForge V4 came out. It was the latest and greatest receiver for Fat Shark modules, and many people were getting them. In one particular case, someone had posted that the button board, the board along the side, how you manipulate the receiver, they had gotten it out of the package and it just fell out. LaForge jumps right in, tell them, send it to us, we'll get you taken care of. And, you know, the community really appreciates a vendor such as that jumping right in. But that illustrates one thing, that oftentimes when we have a complaint or a concern or possibly something negative, that we jump right to social media. And that goes out to everyone, not just the company. But unfortunately, LaForge sent a replacement before they received the old one. And what they found was, according to their synopsis, was that it's very likely that the module had gotten wedged inside the compartment in some way, and when they tried to remove it, they pulled on that board and snapped it off. So that's one factor when it comes to these things, of people stating that something died. How did it die? Was it their fault? Did it go into water, but now they don't have the money to replace it, so instead they're going to come forward and claim that the board just died on its own? It's possible. I'm not saying a lot of people are doing that. I'm not saying anyone's doing that, but it's possible. The second story is about the Mobula 7 frame. Back when that came out, you know, it was very hot and a lot of people were flying it. It was winter time here in the Northern Hemisphere, and a lot of us were flying it outside, and the frame was breaking. Now, I showed my breakage, but I flew mine in either warmer conditions outside or in the house. And I showed a crash reel, I believe, during that video as well. And I did have a breakage, and it fixed relatively easy, but we were seeing extreme examples where an entire motor and that duct around the motor, everything just ripped off. And so I was just kind of scrolling through because I was curious. Do we have a lot of people who have jumped into FPV, and they jumped in with the Mobula 7 and they didn't understand necessarily that flying in cold temperatures is going to make plastic brittle, or that's just the flying space they had and their excitement, they couldn't contain themselves and they went out and flew it. So I was scrolling through a lot of these things looking for other factors such as the temperature, and I wanted some crash details. It's very rare that you saw a lot of DVR in the cases of these issues come up, whether it's the Mobula 7 or the Happy Model flight controller. It's very rare that we see DVR of it just flying along and then it dies. And I think that tells me something as well. But back to the frame discussion. So I would scroll through these, and every once in a while I would ask, you know, what was the temperature? Was it outside? You know, what's your location? You know, had it hit a bunch of things during your flights, or was this just the only crash? Was this right out of box? Sometimes I would ask those questions and it would offend others, and that's probably on me because I didn't write it well enough to where they understood. I was just wanting to find out. I wasn't defending. I was just curious about it myself. So I was wanting to figure out either what I did wrong or how their experience differed than mine, to figure out the difference between my experience and their experience. And so we're kind of in this area where positive reinforcement for negativity kind of gets in that cycle. You know, we see that a lot of times in the news where groups want to bicker and argue that, you know, we're number one sort of stuff. And I noticed in one particular thread on Facebook within the Mobula 7 group that someone had stated their frame had broken. I was kind of scrolling through and I saw other people were jumping in. Oh yeah, you know, it's made of Swiss cheese. The frame's no good. Various sorts of negativity like that. And some of it could have been valid. But as I got deeper, I noticed that a couple of people, two, were actually piling on, and then they admitted to not having one. That doesn't help. It definitely skews how things are viewed if you've got people who will just say, oh yeah, they agree and it's no good, but they don't have one. So that happens as well. So when it comes to these failures, how much of it is us crashing things and expecting it to just fly, or pulling too many amps and expecting it to handle it, or getting it in water and not having enough money to replace it, so we complain that it failed to try to get a free one? Those things happen. So where does that play in this sentiment that the flight controllers are dying? But like I said, your experiences are valid. You need to go with your experiences. If you've got a buddy, someone that you trust, or someone that you fly with, and they had these particular kind of experiences, that is also valid. But I can't use this platform and record a video stating that those things are facts and spread that out to others. I think it's something that we all need to consider when we're reading social media stuff, that sometimes negativity is popular. This comment by License to Drive, this is actually a discussion. It's probably going to take up just about all of the screen. I just wanted to show this to you. You might want to pause it. I thought it was a pretty positive and kind of just straightforward sort of discussion about things. And one thing I wanted to bring up is I very much want to try the toothpick, and I want to try Bob's recommended components, because I do think that he's been working on this, and I would like to see what he's worked on. You know, I don't have a dog in this fight of whether something is good or something is bad. I want to try different things and find out for myself. It's like many things in my life. I say a realist, but some people would say a pessimist, that if somebody tells me something, I might take that information and say, okay, well, I need to find out for myself. I can't necessarily agree or disagree because I don't have any information about that myself. And so I want to try Bob's toothpick out, and I want to try his recommended components for sure. RocketFPV writes, thanks for the awesome review. Thank you. I really love this class of quad. Small, powerful, and most important, can be flown in smaller areas. For freestyle with so little weight, the momentum is not there, but for racing around, perfect. But I will pass on this one. Too many quads already. I'm currently experimenting with an 85mm 35-gram 2S build with 1103 motors. And I bring this up because Rock is right. When it comes to throwing these things over something, you'll be able to more likely do a power loop where you're powering through things. But when you get to kind of this position, you have to let off the throttle, and then you're hoping you get some distance over whatever the object is before you come down. Those are the things that we're not going to be able to do a lot of, or cover a wide distance. Can you do dives? Can you throw it over smaller things? Sure, but as a pilot, you're going to have to learn what those things are. Wooptie Whoop writes, nice. Will 650 3S work, or is it too heavy? A, it's too heavy, and B, it won't fit. Doing a bunch of testing on this off camera, I found that GNB batteries, even the old GNB batteries, which were a little bit thicker, the 2S 450, they do fit. They're kind of tight. The 520s also fit. The RDQ branded 520s also fit. I think they're 525s in the case of RDQs, but I'm pretty convinced at this point that RDQ batteries are GNB batteries. So pick where you buy. I think you'll find they're the same as well. If you don't find they're the same, I think you'll find they're really, really close. I don't have any 2S tattoo batteries to try. I've been looking for a while for my 2S 450 tattoo battery, and I just can't find it. I know there's one here somewhere, but I can't find it. I've got a lot of batteries, so I've kind of gone awry there somewhere. I probably put that 2S battery in a bag that doesn't have 2S other batteries in it. But you can fly the 350s that we used on the Mobula HD and the Mobula 7s. You can connect those. They'll fit in here just fine. Pretty much anything under that 525 in that same sort of format that you find from RDQ or GNB will fit, and the older GNB up 2S 450 will also fit. If you're wanting to run 3S, there aren't as many batteries you can fit. Of course, it comes with one from Happy Model, and I think that also is a GNB battery. tinyhoop.com has the 3S 333 battery from my LiPo that will also fit. That's actually what I flew this on mostly. That brings me to another question. Another thing that people asked about was why 3S, and I've talked about that a little bit. And the other thing was I wanted to stress the components. Because of that discussion about the reliability, I wanted to spend my time pushing as much voltage through this as I could in order so that I could find that your experience with 3S would be true to mine. I try. The Graphics Guy 1 writes, if anyone ever wants a custom canopy design for something, hit me up. And then down below, he's got his Instagram. I just thought some of you might be interested, so I put that in here. Me66 writes, well, is it fast? Sailfish are known for being very fast. Yes, it is fast. But as I discussed in that 2S flight footage, the field of view of that camera, the field of view makes it seem even faster. And I like that. Chris Sullivan writes, crumple zones work the same way as flexi-carbon. And that's in response to me talking about how much this flexes. And yeah, in cars, crumple zones, things give so other things don't have to. So as long as it's not affecting flight performance, I'm not against flexible carbon. You guys could feel differently. Charles Henshaw writes, I think it's great that Happy Model is sending out prototypes, getting feedback, and making the necessary changes before going into production. Great review as always. Cheers. Thank you very much. There's kind of two sides to that coin. So if you get stuff like, you know, in review channels and you submit that feedback, you kind of have to trust that they're actually going to do that. And in Happy Model's case, because of the things I discussed in the past video, I do think the motors are going to come out with longer motor leads and a 1.5 millimeter shaft because they're already available. The 1.5 millimeter shaft is already available. It would be a minor tweak. They can use the shorter leads for other products, and then they could just use the longer leads on this one. So that's a change I'm pretty comfortable with because of that product essentially already being mainly available. In other cases, I've submitted feedback and there's been no change. Many times the prototypes are really already production. They're just early runs to make sure that their assembly and maybe the new components are reliable, and so they send those to reviewers. And it's rare you see many companies make changes after the fact. 9 times out of 10, they're going to roll with it and they'll make changes on version 2. And some people really don't like that. WreckitFPV writes, nice. Where can I get this board stack? Always dig your reviews, man. Thanks. Thank you very much, Wreckit. This should be out probably in the next week to 10 days, so you should see pre-orders going to orders, and hopefully we see some here in the States. I think RDQ is going to be getting some, or at least Tyler, the owner of RDQ, has indicated he's going to. We'll probably see other shops pick this up as well. I think this is going to be the next hot product, and we're going to see it not just on Banggood, but we're going to be seeing it sold all over the place. Where can you get the board in the stack? You probably have to wait another couple of weeks at least after the Sailfly is released for purchase. So it could be a month, it could be 6 weeks before you see the actual board available, the 2.1 version board. Ock_ writes, they were originally for some parrot drone like 3 years ago. I think then King Kong cloned them, but is using a better plastic. And that's in refer to the props. I had mentioned in the video, I thought they were 2.5 to 3 years ago, and Ock kind of confirmed that. Although I wasn't thinking they came from a parent drone, I wasn't really certain what they were originally for. Smooth Cruiser 37 writes, Nick, are you using some type of roll and yaw mix? Your carving around the trees is very impressive. No, I really don't have much of a setup. I don't do anything exotic. I don't spend a lot of time on filters when it comes to PID tune. I don't use any expo. I don't use any throttle curves. And I bring this up because Not Fast Enough and I were having a kind of a phone call via Discord back when I was setting up the Alien Whoop that I've got here. And I do think I'm going to make a video on this because it's a different experience. And I think it's something that people need to be more aware of. Actually, I've had this a lot longer than I did that Armor 65 that also is running Not Fast Enough silverware. But he and I were talking about kind of our background, just general discussion, just two guys kind of on the phone. And we were kind of both talking about how we don't do a lot of changes to things in order to fly them. We just kind of fly them. And I think that stems from the fact that the period of time where we started to fly, and I think he's been flying longer than I have. I've been flying about 3.5 years, maybe a little bit more than that now. We didn't have a lot of these things that would work. Either we didn't have it in our flight controller firmware, or it didn't work very well and the components that we had didn't work very well. So we had to kind of fly to have fun, and we had to make all those limitations work for us. So maybe you avoid doing certain types of moves because the machine just didn't handle that very well, or you developed a flight style that just fit the where you were at in our evolution of FPV at the time. And so I think that's why my setups are really, really boring. I have very specific rates. I really want my rates where I want my rates. And that was something that with this Alien, with the silverware on here, that really kind of limited me, is the rates were so low, and even on the higher rates that you could do stick commands to get to, I really wasn't comfortable flying that. As a matter of fact, I wasn't very effective in flying it. But Travis had actually worked in Betaflight rates into the latest edition, so he walked me through flashing that and walked me through the config file, and that's where we got to talking about that discussion. And so when it comes to my flights, I'm really not doing anything fancy other than I fly a lot, so I have a lot of stick time. I fly in the same spaces, so I know them very, very well. I know the stick inputs very, very well. And I think that, I hope that that helps you all make decisions about the machines and how they fly and if they fit for you, because one, I don't have time to go visit other locations. I've got 3 kids, and they're all very, very busy, and my wife is actually out of town right now. So I'm single parenting right now with her being gone. So if I needed to go to other places to fly to make valid review videos, I probably just wouldn't do it. I would probably just make videos for myself. And if people liked them, they liked them. But I don't think I could specifically do enough review videos to gain traction if I actually had to go to different locations. Early on, my first year, I think I did 3 or 4 5-inch quads, and it was such a pain to go find a spot to fly. And then I always felt like I was not flying it enough. I was always worried about the machine being sold and people having bad experiences, and because I'd only flown 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 packs, that my testing wasn't good enough. And so that's something that I'm provided with flying micros and flying them in the house or out in the yard, that I could put a whole bunch of packs through them, 40, 50, 60, 70 packs through them, and I can be relatively certain that, provided the manufacturer doesn't make any changes, your experience will be very, very similar to mine. And that's what I want. I front load my videos with a lot of quick information and then flight. I used to not narrate over that, but many people were asking for narrations. I try to leave my opinion about a quad till the end so that you can make your decision based upon the quick roll specs and the flight, and then you can decide whether it's a machine for you or not. Because I'd rather the machine sell itself than my opinion sell the machine. Hopefully I've answered your questions. I have one last question for you, for the people that made it all the way here to the end. Do you want to see a Betaflight 4 PID tune? It's going to need to be quite a few of you, so I can do it, and then the publishing the video, that's another side of things. So it involves more time, and if I take time for that, then it takes time from something else away. So consider that. If you're happy with what you've seen so far and you don't need to see a Betaflight tune, then we just move on. But if you really want to see a Betaflight 4 tune, I will work on that, and I will make a video on that if we have enough interest. If you have any more comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. Oh, my shirt! It's a Tiny Whoop shirt. Exploded view. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.